Center for the American Experiment publishes a quarterly magazine called Thinking Minnesota. The fall issue of Thinking Minnesota is going to come out on Monday, and the cover story is on political indoctrination in the Edina public schools. My talk tonight...
Put the microphone up closer, please.
See if I can just hold it too.
Yep.
Okay. The cover story is going to be on political indoctrination in the Edina public schools. What I'm going to say tonight is basically a preview of the contents of that article, but there's much more in the article than I have time to cover tonight. So I would really encourage you to look for that magazine and read the story as well as the rest of the contents of our quarterly journal. We got interested in the Edina public schools when we learned about a letter that appeared in Zephyrus, which is the Edina High School. See, I already missed my first slide. This is what the cover of that magazine looks like. It's quite striking. And if you keep your eye out for it, I think you're going to be seeing it all over Edina as of next week. So we first got interested in looking into the Edina public schools when we learned about a letter that appeared in Zephyrus, which is the Edina High School newspaper, just after last November's election. The letter was written by Tim Klobuchar and was signed by 80 teachers at Edina High School. It expressed dismay with the result of the election and promised to support students during the difficult times ahead. And what we have here, I'm just going to read to you some quotes from this letter that was signed by 80 Edina High School teachers. Over the last week, in the wake of a disturbing example of racial hate speech at our school and a historically divisive election, you've heard and read a lot of calls for unity for the school and the nation. This letter is not one of them. And somewhat surprisingly, these 80 teachers went on to say, no, we don't want unity. And the implication was you can't be unified with conservatives or with Republicans. So the letter goes on. Over the course of the long campaign, multiple groups of students might have felt targeted in some way. Black, Hispanic, Muslim, Jewish, LGBTQ+, and female students, particularly sexual assault survivors among them. Right now, many of you in these groups feel more vulnerable than usual because of the racist image spread on social media, as well as the results of the election. Know that we will do all that we can to protect you and to fight for you. And the letter goes on, many of you have made clear through conversations with us that right now you don't feel physically safe. Some of you were crying the morning after the election, worried about possible consequences to others, such as your friends being deported. The school building the day after the election was as somber and quiet as we've ever seen it. And when I read this, I can't help wondering, when Mitt Romney lost the election in 2012, were the teachers setting up support groups for crying Republican students? I never heard about that. So we wrote about that letter on our website, americanexperiment.org. And when we did that, we started getting emails and comments on our post and comments on Facebook from Edina students and parents telling us about more instances of inappropriate liberal indoctrination and bullying of conservative students and parents. And I just want to quote from some of these communications that we got from people in Edina. They really, in my opinion, are rather shocking. Some of them had to do with the election, like this one. This is from an Edina student. The next day, the day after Trump won, was even harder. Teachers were crying alongside students in the classroom. One teacher sat in front of a class of 100 through tears that, quote, the election was rigged. Teachers bashed President Trump in front of their students, and people continued to bully me for my views. I had to have my mom come pick me up after third hour that day. This is another Edina High School student. Every teacher was crying in class. One even told the whole class, quote, Trump winning is worse than 9/11 and the Columbine shooting, close quote. The amount of liberal propaganda that was pushed every single day in class this year was worse than it's ever been, and you're bullied by the teachers and every student if you dare speak against it. This one comes from another Edina High School student. The day of the election, every single student was in the Commons chanting F Trump, and the teachers never did anything.
One ahead.
Oh, okay. This one is also post-election, and it highlights the obsession, really, that the Edina Public Schools manifest with race. And we'll come back to that more than once over the course of the presentation. But this is a mother of two Edina High School students. And she says, in talking with my daughters, it came out that yesterday in my 10th graders AP World class, the teacher called out any Trump supporters and asked them to assure the class that they weren't racist. Now, as you go through all of these accounts that we've gotten from Edina students and parents, one thing that comes through very, very clearly is that the Democratic Party is the official party of the Edina Public Schools. There is no doubt about that whatsoever. This one comes from an Edina elementary school teacher. This is actually before the election. A third or fourth grader wore a Donald Trump shirt to class. And the teacher wrote to us, the teacher went into the staff lounge announcing she was so upset. She asked the student not to wear it into her classroom again and went on to disparage his family, asking all teachers in the lounge if they knew this family was Republican, and stating that she was so disappointed, etc. This comes from another Edina teacher. She says, I've been told on multiple occasions to quit my job and work at a private school or for the Koch brothers. I had a curriculum trainer ask me this summer why I lived in the Twin Cities rather than in greater Minnesota with more of my kind. And this next one comes from another Edina mother. She says, thank you for beginning to expose the liberal Edina school system in your most recent series. We have wanted to do something for many years, but we felt we had no voice and feared retribution for our children. I'm going to just pause there and talk about that for a moment, because in talking with many, many parents and students from the Edina Public Schools, this was a theme that came up over and over and over and over again. They were happy to tell us about their experiences, but they were terrified at the idea that they might be identified, because every single one of them believed that if teachers in the Edina Public Schools knew that they had been critical of this political indoctrination, that their children would be punished. They'd be punished with poor grades, and they would be punished with being humiliated in the classroom, which these people tell us is usually what happens if anybody tries to express views that are not part of the left-wing canon. So this mother continues, I want to offer one more example of what we've experienced. During Edina's May term, our child had no choice but to take a class called Race, Racism, and Whiteness, as all other classes were full. The name alone says it all. It was in this class that the teacher, while reading a poem aloud, came to a word, stopped, and said that the word she was about to say next made her feel physically ill, just by saying it. The word was police. Now the woman who brought this instance to our attention told us that she had family members. I don't remember if her husband was in law enforcement, but she had brothers in law enforcement and so forth. Say again? You're the source?
Yeah.
Well, let's have a round of applause. The idea that in a public high school, the teacher would feel free to say something like that. And when you get this number of instances, you're not talking about a rogue teacher. You're not talking about somebody having a bad day. You're talking about a consistent pattern that obviously is condoned by the administration. When students are out there chanting F Trump, and teachers stand by and do nothing, they know that what's going on here is consistent with what the school wants, with what the administrators want, with what the main body of the teachers want. You don't get this kind of consistent report unless it is something that is really pervasive in the school. Now, we've been focused primarily so far on the high school, but one of the things that we learned as we continued looking into this is that indoctrination in Edina does not begin at the high school level. Rather, it starts in the elementary grades. There is a book called A is for Activist, which is part of Edina's elementary school curriculum. And this is kind of a montage of pages from that book. And it says things like this. It says, A is for activism, actively answering a call to action. Are you an activist? C is for co-op, and also creative counter to corporate vultures. There's a lot of people in Edina that work for companies. And you know, you can just picture the third grader coming home, Dad, are you a corporate vulture? I'm supposed to counter you if you are. It's just unbelievable. F, of course, is for feminist, and it's also for fairness in our pay. T is for trans. Now, you know, when I was a kid, T might stand for, I don't know, train or tuba, I don't know. There are all kinds of things T could stand for, but I picture the 9-year-old kid coming home and saying, T is for trans. What's a trans, Mommy? It's just extraordinary. And X, of course, X is for Malcolm X. Who else? So one of the things that we tried to understand is where this comes from. This leftism that you see really shot through the Edina public schools from the elementary level to the high school level. Did it just kind of creep in inadvertently? That didn't seem likely. And we think that at least part of the answer, well, first of all, we think it's a conscious decision by the administration of the school district. And we think that one aspect of that decision, or one manifestation of that decision, is the adoption of the All for All plan, which happened in 2013. The All for All plan was intended to address racial achievement gaps, which exist in many schools. And the All for All plan mandated an intensive focus on race in everything that the schools do. And it's really amazing. You know, I went to school in South Dakota in the 1950s and 60s, and race never came up. You know, now if you'd gone to school in Alabama in the 1930s, I'm guessing race would have come up fairly often. But I don't think it would have come up as often in Alabama in the 1930s as it comes up here in Edina in the 21st century. It is amazing the level of obsession with all things racial. And a lot of that comes from this All for All program. The premise of the All for All program is that achievement gaps are caused by white racism, and therefore the solution to achievement gaps is to stamp out white racism. So here are some of the things that the administration at Edina has mandated as part of the All for All program. They have mandated, quote, a shift in how all district employees approach their work. The Edina Public Schools must view, quote, all teaching and learning experiences through a, quote, lens of racial equity. Now, most people don't spend their lives studying this kind of thing, but if you do, you are aware of the fact that equity is a very special word. Equity doesn't mean how much value you have in your house, and equity most surely does not mean equality, which is what in this context innocent people would probably assume that it means. Equity has become a term of art. Equity is a word that's got a meaning on the left. And when leftists use the word equity, they do not mean equality. Equity is code for a whole long laundry list of left-wing presumptions and attitudes. So this has led to the adoption of a number of policies, including, as we see here, a commitment to recruit, hire, and retain high-quality, racially conscious teachers and administrators. It's extraordinary. You know, when I was going to high school, I think it probably didn't occur to our school board, but if it had, they would have said, oh, we really don't want to have racially conscious teachers in our schools. That doesn't seem right. But that's exactly what Edina is focused like a laser on trying to bring in. And it goes on to say that the All for All program mandates a policy of ensuring that students, quote, acquire an awareness of their own cultural identity and value racial, cultural, and ethnic diversities. You see this emphasis on race and ethnicity everywhere in the Edina schools. Here are a couple of examples from elementary school. Highlands is one of the elementary schools in Edina, and this is a weekly email that the principal of that school sends out to teachers and perhaps others. And you'll see this one is dated September 8, 2017, so it's almost hot off the press. This is one that came out just recently. And I just want to quote a couple of things from this email. The principal says that the 4 areas of ongoing professional learning, I assume that's learning by teachers, this year are personalized learning, equity, there's that term again, math, I'm glad to see math made it in there, and restitution/restorative justice. Now, I'm a lawyer, and I actually know what restitution means. Restitution means that if you have improperly obtained something or inadvertently obtained something, you have to give it back. And I would dearly love to know what these teachers are talking about when they say that one of their principal focuses is restitution and restorative justice.
Restitution self-discipline, written by Johnson.
Just let him finish. Let him finish.
But nonetheless, that restitution is not fit your definition of restitution.
I don't know. And restorative justice
Just let
sounds
him
good.
finish his talk. Let him finish his talk.
So the email continues. Highlands has weathered its share of challenges over the years, whether in the design of our classroom learning spaces, engaging in multi-age learning, facing change to our outdoor learning spaces, considering what books to teach students about families, and now, how to embrace ancestry, genetic code, and melanin, as well as how to challenge kids to be change makers. Well, melanin, as you know, is the substance in the skin that makes it dark. It gives it color. And so this elementary school principal is saying that one of the major efforts they're embarked on now is how to embrace ancestry, genetic code, and melanin. Well, that sounds to me like Berlin in the 1930s. But it isn't. It isn't. It isn't Berlin in the 1930s. It is Edina in the 21st century. This is, as well as how to challenge kids to be change makers. You know, these are second graders or whatever. But you are going to be a change maker. This is more. This is from the elementary school level, and this is Highlands Elementary School in particular. And you see in this part of the screen here in the lower right that these people are looking at a slide on the screen. And this was tweeted on the official Highlands Twitter account. That's where I got it. And what they're looking at is a lesson that they're being taught on public policy and colorblind racism. And you may not even realize this, but on the left today, it is a common doctrine that if you don't care about skin color and you just treat every single person the same, you are a racist. And that is called colorblind racism. And if you look at the screen, I'm not sure if you can make it out or not, but on the screen, one of the things that it says is the white color of colorblindness. So the theory is that if things are colorblind, if you just don't pay any attention to race, you don't care about race, well, that's white. And then it goes on to call for a, quote, personal commitment to fight colorblind racism. You know, colorblind policy, colorblind behavior is something that Americans have worked for, longed for, fought for a couple hundred years, maybe longer. Martin Luther King talked about it. Many, many millions of Americans, some famous, most not, have talked about colorblind values. Always considered to be a good thing, the goal toward which our country should be striving, but not anymore, not on the left. And what the elementary school children in Edina are being taught is that to be colorblind is to be a racist. Now, if you look at the tweet that's right above the photo, this is a tweet that went out on the Highlands Elementary official Twitter account like 5 minutes after the picture of the colorblind racism class. And what it says is time to teach the truth and real American history. And I read that and I shudder to think what the person who tweeted that means by the truth and real American history. I have a feeling that it is not a positive portrayal of America's 200 years of history. And again, bearing in mind that this is not some advanced college seminar, this is elementary school. And they've undertaken to teach the real American history, as this person put it. So a school, in my view, can have only one top priority. At one time, the top priority of the Edina schools was to be the best. Now the priority is to be the most liberal. At least that's the way it looks to me. As you might expect, downgrading excellence as an objective has consequences. The consequence is that the Edina schools are not what they once were. We can see the decline in this chart. And what's striking about this is that it covers a period of only 3 years. The numbers on the left are from the 2013 to 2014 school year. The numbers on the right are from the 2016 to 2017 school year, just 3 years later. And these come straight from the Minnesota State Department of Education data.
Is this all in your article?
Yeah, and more. I'm just scratching. Oh, no. Just get the magazine. No, I'm just scratching the surface. There's much more in the article. In 2014, 86% of Edina High School students met reading standards. In 2017, that had dropped to 79%. In 2014, 79% of Edina High School students met state math standards. That had dropped to 66% in 2017, which means that 1/3 of the students at Edina High School are not able to do math at grade level. These next numbers are kind of shocking. I went back and verified them myself, going into the original databases at the Department of Education and setting up the spreadsheet and laying it out. And as amazing as it may seem, these numbers are correct. In 2014, Edina ranked 5th among Minnesota public high schools in reading proficiency. By 2017, Edina had dropped to 29th among Minnesota public high schools in reading efficiency. Math is even worse. In 2014, Edina ranked 10th among Minnesota public high schools. That includes charter schools, by the way, but not private schools. In 2014, Edina was 10th in math proficiency. In 2017, Edina had fallen all the way down to 40th in math proficiency. Edina is no longer one of the upper-rated school districts when it comes to actual student test results. And we did a few comparisons here just to see how Edina shapes up in comparison to some schools that you probably think of as being peers. This is a comparison of Edina with Wayzata High School. And as you can see, Wayzata beats Edina pretty badly in both reading and math. And by the way, these are the State Department of Education numbers as reported in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. The Minneapolis Star-Tribune actually put out this database on Minnesota high schools. It was very interesting. They did this maybe a couple of months ago when the scores had just recently come out. But you see Wayzata performing significantly better than Edina. This is East Ridge. Most of you probably never heard of East Ridge, at least not until recently when they got good at football. They're a brand new school. I think it's in Woodbury.
Yes, it is.
But you'll see that East Ridge beats Edina in both reading and math. This is Edina and Orono beats Edina pretty badly in both reading and math. Maple Grove does almost exactly the same as Edina in both of those categories. And this comparison is one that I think is really striking. It's a comparison between Edina High School and Eastview High School. You all know where Eastview is, don't you? You've heard of Eastview?
Apple Valley.
Yes, it's in Apple Valley and draws from part of Apple Valley, part of Egan, and a little bit of Rosemount. And as you can see here, Eastview absolutely crushes Edina in these test scores. And one of the things that the Star-Tribune did, or maybe the Department of Education did it, but it was, I think the Strib did, it was reported anyway in the Strib, is they would look at the number of minorities and poor students, and they would project passing percentages based on those numbers in part. And what you see here is that Edina performs about as expected. For reading, there's a predicted 77 based on minorities and poor students, actual 79, predicted 71 in math, actual 66. So they actually perform below that expectation. But look at Eastview. Eastview is predicted in reading at 73%, actually performed at 82%, which is a lot better, even though it says about as expected. And in math, the predicted passage rate is 68%, the actual rate is 83%. And this is really interesting because Eastview has 1.5 times as many minority students as Edina and twice as many poor students. Twice as many poor students. And what you're seeing is that according to the Star Tribune and maybe the Department of Education, a school like Eastview is significantly outperforming expectations, obviously in part because it's doing a better job of getting poor students, minority students, performing at the level that they ought to be performing at. Whereas Edina's not doing that. Edina's got 1/3 of its high school kids who can't do math at grade level. So, one of the things that we've seen over and over again is that when people say they're trying to help minorities, they're trying to help poorer people, poorer kids, and then they do special things that they say are intended to help those people, they wind up getting hurt. They wind up getting hurt. It hurts them the worst. If you've got smart, educated parents who look over your shoulder doing the homework and make you toe the line, a little goofiness in school, maybe it doesn't hurt you so much. But if school is your only chance to really excel, and the school focuses on a bunch of collateral stuff instead of insisting on excellence from every student, which used to be the Edina way, who suffers? Well, you know who suffers from that. So that really is the end of the presentation. The Edina schools have sacrificed quality education to politics. I think the testimonies from all those people, that's just striking the surface. There's a lot more where those came from in the article that's coming out next week. And my final observation is that a school system can have only one top priority. And in Edina, for many years, nobody doubted what that priority was. Edina was going to be the best darn school system around, and they were going to insist on the best performance from all of their students, and they were going to strive for excellence all the time. And if that's no longer your top priority, and your top priority is an ideological agenda that you want to turn students into change makers and teach them about definitions of racism that don't correspond to what most of us mean by that word and things of that sort, if that's your top priority, you're going to find that the quality of the education is inevitably going to slip.